Okay, so there's mentioning in the beginning of the book about different planets and the solar system. Um, this particular solar system where the book is based upon is called the Necrom solar system, which actually gets its name from a very powerful necromancer. His name was Lord Necrom, actually. And he was a very powerful necromancer who served a emperor of the universe, a deity, in which the galaxy Diflagon gets its name from. These 8 planets were very important to that particular emperor, and he wanted to have this necromancer attach all of them together, and by the use of mystical portals, all of the planets are combined together, and you can travel in between each planet through the use of these portals, and there are actually many portals located on each planet. Now, the 2 planets that are most mentioned in the book are, of course, Transtosvis, where the elemental people are from, and Cydonia, where the Cydonians have come from. The book essentially mentions of a great war, and it was between the elementals and the Cydonian people, pretty much in a competition for power. Um, the Cydonians and elementals eventually waged war against one another, and the elementals invaded the home planet of Cydonia. The elementals managed to overpower the Cydonian people and actually overthrew the original governing body, which ruled the entire planet as a council, and that pretty much sent the 5 families that controlled the entire planet of Cydonia to safe ground, where they fled to Cherkos. Now, the elementals managed to take over a very large portion of Cydonia, but there were still a lot of Cydonian nations still left intact, which remained secretive to the elemental people, and a lot of them the elementals could not enter in because the Cydonians had cast mystical spells on these lands. As the Cydonians arrived at Cherkos, the 5 families managed to rule the planet of Cherkos. The native people thought that they were gods because they had the ability to manipulate natural elements that they could use in combat, and they could even perform certain miracles and spells, and they were very powerful beings. And they were respected, and even though they ruled the planet with an iron fist, they were fair to the people. Um, Shortly after a span of several hundred years, the elementals managed to find the portal on Cydonia that led to Cherkos. And this same portal that the original 5 families thought they had closed turned out still remained active. The elemental invasion eventually came in to Cherkos that led to an epic war even greater than what happened on Cydonia. The 5 families fought furiously against the elementals, and in the end, a lot of the great members of the 5 families had perished away, but there were 2 great families that remained intact that still ruled over the planet. Um, the elementals finally, when they had managed to crush the Cydonian forces enough, they fled the planet and they ascended high into the mountain of Latha, which is actually a mystic and spiritual mountain which had been praised not only by the natives, and it is of course the highest mountain that is in Cherkos. So the elementals thought it would be befitting to ascend into these mountains where they could rule over the planet. Now, part of their scheme was to fool the natives into thinking that they were the real gods, that the Cydonians were false gods, and that they had to be punished because they falsely claimed to be deities. The people, of course, turned on the Cydonians, and this helped to further push the Cydonians away. Now, the interesting thing is, although the elementals managed to put a huge stop on the Cydonian people, many Cydonians still inhabit the planet of Cherkos. And throughout the book, you come to find out a little bit more about the history that occurs between the 2 nations, and as the series goes along, you learn more and more and more. And I don't want to really give the book away too much, and that's why I'm not going to go too far into detail as far as the Elemental and Sidonian conflict. And it pretty much escalates throughout the book, and it eventually begins to turn into a war again. Now, you of course have the two most powerful nations at the time right now, which would be Masamune Kureiko's Imperial Empire and Michael Vordakov VIII's Arched Republic. Um, Both of these nations are, of course, ruled by purebred Sidonian rulers. Michael Vordakov VIII is actually somewhat mysterious. Um, the book is a bit confusing because it says that he's one age, and then essentially it says that he is another age. And really, the age of Masamune Kureiko is pretty stable. However, you come to find out that Vordakov does frequently lie about his age, and he is indeed older than what people believe. I don't want to go too far into detail about that either because it gives away a lot of the series. What I am willing to say is that Vordakov pretty much rules his empire with a very, very, very strict law system. He is a very iron-fisted individual who believes in discipline and perfection. His people somewhat have a resentment for him, but yet they fear him. However, they cannot help but respect him because he managed to recreate his family's empire, which had fallen in the past. And he managed to set on a campaign to reunite all of the city-states together. And in that, the Arched Republic was reborn. Masamune Kureiko is actually a very feared ruler throughout the planet because he is very brave and he is war-bent. He enjoys warfare, and he actually has the satisfaction of defeating other Sidonians. He of course firmly controls 1/3 of the continent of Sargia, and his army of course is very sophisticated, it is very advanced, and he has some of the best resources on the continent itself, which of course sparks envy from Michael Vordakov VIII. It is throughout the book that, towards the beginning at least, where their conflict starts to grow stronger until essentially both nations wage war against one another. This of course goes on for some time, and it essentially awakens ancient Sidonian who had been put to rest many years before. And he of course is given the name the Black Dragon, and you later come to find out that his name is Diego Yantogray. The Yantogray family is actually one of the most powerful, well not one of, they are the most powerful Sidonian family, and they are actually one of the original survivors of the Great War. Diego is one of the descendants of this family, and he of course inherits a very, very great amount of power, and he has a certain level of fear that people have throughout the planet. He remains a very mysterious character in the first book, and I have it so. In the beginning, you have the ability to develop a very strong dislike for Diego. He seems to lack sympathy, and he seems to only care for blood, more bloodshed, and all he wants to do is actually conquer the entire planet and restore it to Sidonian control as it was, and even go further to remove the elementals from power and also invade the elemental homeland, take it over, go back to Sidonia, take Sidonia back, and rule over everything as a commander. But as you read the book and you come to find out a little bit more about Diego, you seem to find out that he actually has multiple personalities, and he actually has a split personality in conflict with himself. You have the personality of Diego Yantogray, which is actually a very proud, loving, caring, innocent person. And then you have the persona of the Black Dragon, which is actually a violent, ruthless, bloodthirsty being. throughout the book, you can tell when Diego struggles within himself to control himself, to be who he is, but essentially he succumbs to the power that is the persona of the black dragon that lives within his body. Um, you come to find out a little bit about him, um, although I don't like to go too far into detail in the first book about Diego, because there is another book in the series that will further chronicle the entire life of Diego Llanto Grace, which will of course be a very, very epic book. Um, there are several characters and names that are hard to pronounce in the book. You also have the top 5 Sidonian families, and because it takes place in another universe, obviously there's a different racial structure here. And the funny thing about how I have constructed this planet is you have a lot of these people which don't look down upon people necessarily upon their skin color or necessarily their race. Essentially, what indicates dominance is one person's ability to be able to outmatch others, whether it is some kind of talent in arts or military strength or the ability to command or lead people. There's actually a little less prejudice than what you would see in our own current time. However, there is a lot of feud because obviously nations do feel that they are stronger than the other, and that is primarily why Cherkos has been a nation of so much turmoil, because all of the races that have come to melt together on Cherkos come to find that they have to coexist, but yet there is a somewhat human-like trait which makes them want to prove that they are stronger than the other races. And this attributes to a lot of the chaos that Cherkos houses, even though it is a very beautiful planet with very beautiful landscapes. It is a war-filled planet. Throughout the book, you come to understand a little bit more of the Sidonian and elemental struggle, and it spills over even further into the second book. And pretty much as the first book goes along, you'll come to realize that not everything can be easily understood, and there are actually constant switching sides, and it's very difficult to tell exactly what side is good, what side is evil. And the reason I've done that is because, there is an old saying that says one man's hero is another man's terrorist. And in this book, it's pretty much hard to say who is right and who is wrong, and I essentially leave it up to the reader to decide who they feel is right, who they feel is wrong.